All right. Sci-fi express lane. Trying not to make this sci-fi complaining lane, but it isn't. Jeff Carroll Sci-fi writer, filmmaker, you know, all that good stuff. Anyway, I'm doing this to kind of blend some things that I've been talking about lately all together. And I was really excited to see this movie, Avatar: The Way of Water, and I saw it last night. And instead of waiting until I drive to work on Monday, I'm going to make this video now while it's fresh in my head and see if I can upload it later today. But there was a conversation that I had online about a comment that Andy Okafor made in reaction to the movie Wakanda Forever. And she was talking about how this movie wasn't African sci-fi and how African sci-fi would be different than Black sci-fi. And I was like, this girl, this writer, this doctor, this woman is, I guess, getting it wrong, because Wakanda Forever is not even Black sci-fi. It's black tweaked white sci-fi, black tweet mainstream sci-fi. And then we talk about where does it go from here. Well, let's see where the conversation goes from here. I saw James Cameron's Avatar last night. Now, Avatar, you could say the same thing. Oh, it's trying to speak up on indigenous cultures, indigenous American cultures, indigenous South American cultures, and all of these first world cultures around the world, and show how Awa and they relate to nature. And The Way of the Water even did a better job. However, as a black science fiction writer, I can separate the difference between that, because I clearly see how the character was talking to his children, how the children were raised, how he talked to his wife. That's not how they do it in first world cultures. No doubt, even the culture that was there on the island did not do the same thing. Now, as a black American, right, they didn't talk to the families the same way, right, as the Avatar Jake Sully did with Zoe Saldana, right? Their family was different, right? Now, as a black American, African American writer, that works for Andy Okafor and all the other African writers. I don't have a problem separating myself, because we bring something different to the table as well. Nobody wants us to all be the exact same, but it's not an offensive thing for us to write within our creative influences. Our influences, yes, we were directly enslaved in a dehumanizing way and distanced from our African culture here in the Americas, even different than the way they were done in Brazil and in the Caribbean, right? So we have a different response to that when we write. When I would have wrote an Avatar type story, which I do, which a lot of black science fiction writers write, we would not have had these people sit around and have their houses burned and look like weaklings, okay? We would not have written a story where technology totally dominates spirituality, okay? If that's the battle, then me as a writer, my idea, my goal is to show as an African American writer how spirituality and the elements and natural science will defeat technological science, if that's what it's going up against. And I remember when I wrote my first when I watched Avatar, the first one, I said, I recognize that's going to be the battle. If these humans are ever going to come back to Earth, then the battle has got to be between spirituality and natural sciences against technology, okay? And what we see here is got to be something different than metal bending sciences. And so for me, that's why I came up with what I'm calling now space scarabs, okay? Because of that. Now, in Binti, one of Indy Okafor's seminal works, chosen by white publishers to publish facts, not independent put out, right? She has the first world people with a magical connection to guiding and flying ships. For me, as an African-American writer, that is the magic Negro. We are not magical. We have a spiritual ability that we train each other to do and we learn how to do. You just don't grow up with it. We're not some hocus pocus magical people. All of our sacred sciences are things that our people developed out of the brilliance of their brain. So I can take issue with African sci-fi. If she wants to take issue with us, sure. She loves to keep it mystical, and Africans keep it mystical. But for a depowered, dehumanized ancestor, right, descendant of dehumanized people who is in the process of reclaiming their humanization, I need to have my people in my fictional world mimic the people in the real world and correct the misunderstanding of how we learned to develop these things, how we learned to chart stars that you can't see with the human eye, how we learned to communicate with animals, how we learned to create and develop science from plants without butchering the plants. When I write about the Twa men and the people that the people call pygmy, they are said to be able to talk to plants. That's how they know so much about plants. Our society is so dumb now that we can't even imagine that something like that is possible. So when you see James Cameron's Avatar, Way of the Water, understand he's blending all of those things together. Yes, I give James Cameron props because this is some level of humanity that we are all reclaiming. When I say we, even white people, yes, we are humans all from Africa. Yes, we are all humans that have this ability. The thing that we want to be able to do is to get over this racial division that they brought up in North Europe that allows us to stay divided and never get back to our human greatness. And when I say human greatness, relating to the planet as planetary spiritual beings. I'm not going to tighten that damn bumpy road. But anyway, that's what I say. That's my response to Indy Okafor. Sure, I love her story, but I used to jokingly call it Space Babar. Why do I call it Space Babar? Is because Babar had this magic thing that he was brought out of Africa, trained by Europeans, brought back to Africa to talk them down and to depower them because he was quote-unquote civilized in Europe. He came back wearing a damn top hat, vest, and walking around with pants and a cane. What elephant does that? Elephants are not naked. They are in their natural skin, and it's perfectly fine. We look down on it because we've been colonized. We've been dehumanized. That's why we look down on even the National Geographics when they should show the women in Africa dancing with their tops off. We've sexualized our bodies. They don't have it sexualized in traditional pre-colonialized Africa because you can't talk about modern day Africa because they're skin bleaching in Nigeria. They ain't skin bleaching because of their natural behavior. They've been colonized just like us. They've been affected by the English language or the people of the English culture. So yes, they aren't in their natural state either. But is it as messed up as African Americans? Not necessarily, but in some ways it is. Very similar, because they're even now looking up to us. They copying us. No, we should be copying them. And they should be copying their ancestors. And we should be shedding ourselves of all of these colonial enslaved ways and behaviors. So that's the real empowerment story. So yeah, when I see Wakanda Forever, I see an attempt to reclaim our Africanness through a black director and African American actors trying to piece together a story in a world that was created by a white man. Ryan Coogler did not create the relationship between Black Panther and their king. Sure, they might have corrected it, but there's only so many corrections you could make, okay? So yeah, they could have corrected it, but they didn't get around to correcting everything to make it totally African. And not to mention, we don't know our total African history. And we're not embracing just Igbo. We embrace the whole West Coast. We embrace all of the whole continent because we know that the West Coast goes back to the Nile. So now we on the West Coast and the East Coast when we call ourselves Hoteps, Pan-Africanists, and all of these people reclaiming their Africanness. So to me, I'm not separating African sci-fi from African American sci-fi, from Caribbean American sci-fi, from South and Central American sci-fi, because we're all the same. Yes, we're same, yet variations. I'm not going to write sci-fi the same as a black African American from the countryside, South Carolina, North Carolina. They're not going to be threatened by overpopulation the way I was. I was born in the Bronx. That's an overpopulated city. You go through the Bronx, you're going to think cyberpunk, cyberfunk. You're going to think overpopulation. Now, if you live in South Carolina, you're going to think of global warming. You live in Miami, you're going to think of global warming because you live with the nature. You see the changes in nature. You don't see that in a city like New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C. You don't see it in those places, Philadelphia. You understand? You have to look at the news and see what's going on around the world to really feel the power of the effects of global warming. One little storm a year, little Hurricane Sandy, ain't going to make you more scared of global warming than overpopulation. Overpopulation is your reality. So yeah, we vary. We have different variations between how we write and what we speculate and our what ifs, and if this goes on and if this continues, or if this had happened, whatever one of our sci-fi questions we choose to answer, we all have a different starting point. Anyway, that's kind of it. I don't have a major problem with Avatar: Way of Water. I appreciate it. I appreciate James Cameron trying to do what he did or is doing. I felt the influx of white fragility, right? Oh my God, though. The whale hunting scene was powerful. For those people who are animal rights activists, I know they love that. But for Africans and indigenous people, we felt the whole movie because we have a culture that teaches us our connection between all the life on this planet. We know the planet is living, right? That hasn't been addressed yet. Awa is just a spiritual element, maybe not even the planet, maybe just the living life forms on the planet. You know, I hope James Cameron goes where I'm about to go, but I've already been further than him in terms of my spiritual elements in my stories. But I appreciate him. Not gonna look at him condescendingly. And for the Dr. Indy Okafors, yeah, I hope you can make your ideas as appealing as Black Panther and Avatar. You understand? Because they reach people. You can write whatever. You can write a non-fiction book. You can teach this. Ain't nobody gonna read it. What kind of effect is it gonna have? Is it gonna become a global box office seller? No. So the goal is to be able to say something productive and get people to read it, to watch it, to enjoy it, to be inspired by it, be impacted by it. Because we write in to have impacts. So I wish her the best and all other people. Let's go. All right. Are any of them perfect? Nah, I ain't gonna say that. I ain't gonna go that far. But did I like them? Sure, I like them. You know, I appreciate them as well. All right, y'all. I'm out of here. Jeff Carroll on the Sci-Fi Express Lane, concluding something that I felt was a vent. So please like, subscribe, share, and comment.